Nobody warned you about this. Nobody sat you down when you were younger and said, hey, there will come a time in your life when the people you counted on the most will not be there. Your calls will go unanswered. Your effort will go unnoticed. Your struggles will feel invisible, and you will be standing in the middle of your own life wondering why it feels like nobody actually cares. But here is what nobody tells you either. That moment, that exact feeling of being completely on your own, might be the most important turning point you will ever experience. Because the life you have been waiting for does not start when people finally show up for you. It starts the day you stop waiting for them. Right now, somewhere, there is a person reading this who has been carrying everything alone. Maybe that person is you. Maybe you have been smiling through exhaustion. Maybe you have been pushing forward with no encouragement, no recognition, no one checking in on you at the end of a hard day. And maybe, quietly, you have started wondering if all of it even matters. It does. Every single bit of it matters. And by the time you finish reading this, you will understand exactly why. Because this is not just another motivational speech telling you to stay positive. This is a real, honest conversation about what happens when life strips away your comfort zone, removes the people you relied on, and forces you to figure out who you really are when nobody is watching. And the answer might surprise you, because the person you become when nobody is helping you is often the strongest version of yourself you have ever been. So if you are tired of waiting for people to believe in you, if you are exhausted from chasing support that never arrives, if you have been building your life in silence and wondering when things will finally change, stay with me, because everything you need to hear right now is in the next few pages. Let us begin. Chapter 1. No one is coming to save you, and that is your power. There is a belief most of us carry without even realizing it. Somewhere deep inside, we are waiting for someone to notice our pain, waiting for someone to hand us the opportunity we deserve, waiting for the right relationship, the right mentor, the right moment before we finally take our life seriously. And while we wait, months turn into years. I want you to think about something. How much of your life have you spent hoping someone else would change things for you? How many Monday mornings have you told yourself, this week will be different, only to end up in the same routine because you were still waiting for external motivation to push you forward? You are not alone in this. Most people live this way. A study from the University of Pennsylvania found that over 60% of adults feel they are waiting for a specific external event before they can truly start improving their lives. A promotion, a relationship, a sign. But here is the uncomfortable truth. That moment rarely comes the way you imagine it. Life does not send you a neatly packaged reason to finally start building yourself. Life usually sends pressure, discomfort, loneliness, and those are not punishments. Those are invitations. The moment you stop expecting someone to come rescue you is the moment you take back control of your own story, not because depending on people is always wrong, but because making your entire future dependent on someone else's willingness to help is one of the most fragile foundations you can build a life on. Think about the people you admire, not celebrities, not influencers posting highlight reels. Think about the real people in your life, the ones who seem genuinely grounded, genuinely strong, genuinely at peace with themselves. If you ask most of them how they got there, they will tell you some version of the same story. There was a season in their life where they had to figure things out alone, where nobody handed them answers, where they had to become their own source of strength because no one else was offering it. And that season did not destroy them. It built them. You might be in that season right now. You might be looking around and seeing everyone else getting support, getting encouragement, getting love, while you are quietly struggling behind the scenes, and it can feel deeply unfair. I want you to know that feeling is valid. You are allowed to feel frustrated. You are allowed to feel tired, but you cannot afford to stay stuck in that frustration forever, because frustration without action just becomes bitterness, and bitterness slowly poisons everything good inside you. Instead of asking, "Why is nobody helping me?" try asking a different question. What can I build with what I already have? Because the answer is almost always more than you think. You do not need the perfect conditions to start changing your life. You do not need everybody on board with your vision. Some of the most extraordinary lives in history were built by people who had almost nothing to work with except their own refusal to give up. Think about someone like J.K. Rowling, writing the first Harry Potter manuscript as a single mother in Edinburgh coffee shops, rejected by 12 publishers before someone finally said yes. Nobody was saving her. She was saving herself, one page at a time. That is what this chapter is about. Not pretending that loneliness does not hurt. It does. But understanding that your ability to move forward without constant rescue is not a sign of something broken. It is a sign of something powerful growing inside you. You are more capable than you have been giving yourself credit for. And the day you truly believe that, really believe it, not just as a motivational quote you read and forget, but as a deep conviction in your gut, is the day your life starts shifting in ways you cannot predict yet. So stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting for someone to knock on your door and say, "Hey, I believe in you. Let me help." Start building. Start now. Start messy. Start scared. Start alone if you have to. Because no one is coming to save you. And honestly, that might be the best thing that ever happens to you. Chapter 2. Teach yourself how to keep going when nobody is clapping. Here is something nobody really talks about. Motivation is easy when life is going well. When people are cheering for you, when your work is getting noticed, when someone texts you and says, "I am proud of you," staying motivated feels almost effortless. But what happens when the applause stops? What happens when you wake up on a cold Tuesday morning, your alarm goes off at 6, it is still dark outside, and there is absolutely no one in your life who is going to notice whether you get up and work on yourself or roll over and go back to sleep? That is where real strength is tested, not in the moments of glory, in the moments of silence. Most people operate on what psychologists call extrinsic motivation. They need something external to push them, a compliment, a deadline, a reward, an audience, and there is nothing wrong with that sometimes. But if your entire ability to keep going depends on external fuel, you are building your life on a supply chain that can break at any moment, because people are inconsistent. Attention fades, support disappears, and when it does, your motivation vanishes with it. You have probably experienced this already. Maybe you started a new workout routine, felt great about it for 2 weeks, and then quit because nobody noticed the changes yet. Maybe you started working on a side project, poured your energy into it, and then abandoned it because nobody seemed to care. Maybe you tried to improve yourself in some way, and the silence from everyone around you made the effort feel pointless. But here's what I need you to understand. The silence does not make your effort pointless. The silence is where your effort matters most. The people who eventually build lives they are proud of are not the people who had the most applause along the way. They are the people who learned how to keep moving forward when nobody was clapping. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called the plateau of latent potential. It describes how progress often feels invisible for a long time before results suddenly become visible. Think of an ice cube sitting in a room that is slowly warming up. At 25 degrees, nothing happens. At 26, 27, 28, still nothing. The ice just sits there, but at 32 degrees, it starts to melt. The breakthrough was not caused by that final degree alone. It was caused by every degree that came before it. Your growth works the same way. Every morning you get up and choose discipline over comfort. That is a degree. Every evening you spend working on your skills instead of numbing yourself with distractions. That is a degree. Every time you push through discouragement and keep going anyway, that is a degree. And right now, it might feel like nothing is changing. But something is changing. You just cannot see it yet. This is why you have to learn how to become your own source of motivation. Not because the world owes you nothing, but because you owe yourself the life you are capable of building. Start small. You do not need to wake up tomorrow and become a completely different person. That kind of pressure actually kills motivation. Instead, focus on building what James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, calls identity-based habits. Instead of saying, I want to get fit, start saying, I am someone who moves my body every day. Instead of, I want to read more, try, I am someone who reads before bed. These are tiny shifts, but they rewire how you see yourself. And how you see yourself determines what you do when nobody is watching. Create anchors in your day that do not depend on anyone else. A morning routine that grounds you. A journaling practice that helps you process your thoughts. A walk that clears your mind. A playlist that shifts your energy. These might sound simple, but they become the scaffolding that holds your discipline together when external support falls away. And stop measuring your progress by other people's reactions. Your worth is not determined by how many people noticed your effort today. Your worth is determined by whether you showed up for yourself today. Those are two completely different metrics. Some days will be hard. Some days you will feel like nothing is working. Some days, the loneliness will hit you in ways you did not expect. But on those days, I want you to remember this. Every person who ever built something meaningful went through seasons where nobody was paying attention. Before Oprah became Oprah, she was a young woman in Baltimore who was told she was unfit for television. Before Steve Jobs changed the world, he was fired from his own company and spent years rebuilding in silence. The invisible seasons are not wasted seasons. They are building seasons. You just have to keep showing up, even when nobody notices, even when progress feels painfully slow, even when the only person who believes in you right now is you. Because one day, all that quiet effort compounds, and suddenly, the life you were silently building becomes the life everyone else admires. But they will only see the result. They will never see the mornings you dragged yourself out of bed when giving up would have been easier. They will never see the nights you spent working on yourself when nobody asked you to. They will never see the invisible discipline that made everything else possible. But you will know, and that knowing is what real confidence is made of. Chapter 3. Being alone does not mean you are losing. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you sat completely alone? No phone, no music, no distractions, just you and your own thoughts, and actually felt okay with it? If you are being honest, it has probably been a while, maybe a long while. And that is not your fault. We live in a world that has quietly trained us to believe that being alone is a problem that needs to be solved. Every advertisement, every movie, every social media feed reinforces the same message. Happiness means being surrounded by people. Success means having a crowd. Worth means being wanted, chosen, included. So when life gets quiet, when friends drift away, when relationships end, when your phone stops buzzing, something inside you panics. Not because something is actually wrong, but because you have been conditioned to believe that silence equals failure. But what if that is completely wrong? What if the quiet seasons of your life are not evidence that you are falling behind, but evidence that you are being prepared for something bigger than you can currently see? There is a difference that most people never learn, and it is a difference that changes everything once you understand it. The difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a feeling of emotional emptiness. It is the ache you feel when you want connection, but cannot find it. It is painful, and it is real, and I am not going to pretend it does not hurt. But solitude is something entirely different. Solitude is a conscious choice to spend time with yourself. It is not running from people. It is running toward your own growth. And here is the thing. You cannot discover who you really are in a crowded room. You cannot hear your own voice when everyone else is talking. You cannot figure out what you actually want from life when you are constantly absorbing other people's expectations, opinions, and judgments. Solitude gives you the space to finally hear yourself clearly. And for many people, that is terrifying, because when the noise stops, the truth starts. You start noticing things you have been avoiding. Maybe you have been staying in a friendship that drains you because you are afraid of having no one. Maybe you have been performing a version of yourself that other people approve of, but that version does not actually feel like you. Maybe you have been so busy chasing connection that you forgot to connect with yourself. A psychologist named Dr. Matthew Bowker at Medill College has spent years studying solitude, and his research consistently shows that people who learn to be comfortable alone develop stronger emotional regulation, greater creativity, and deeper self-awareness than those who constantly seek external stimulation. In other words, learning to sit with yourself is not a weakness. It is a superpower that most people never develop because they are too afraid to try. Think about some of the people who have shaped modern culture. Many of them were not surrounded by crowds during their formative years. They were alone. Nikola Tesla, one of the most brilliant inventors in history, was famously solitary. He once said that being alone is when ideas are born. Emily Dickinson wrote some of the most powerful poetry in the English language from the seclusion of her bedroom in Massachusetts. Henry David Thoreau literally moved to a cabin in the woods to figure out what a meaningful life actually looked like. These were not broken people running from the world. They were people who understood something that most of us are still struggling to learn. That some growth can only happen when you stop outsourcing your emotional state to everyone around you. Now, I am not telling you to move to a cabin in the woods, and I am not saying you should cut off every relationship in your life. Connection matters. Humans are social creatures, and we need each other. But there is a massive difference between wanting connection and needing connection so desperately that you will tolerate anything just to avoid being alone. And that desperation is where people get into real trouble. Think about how many people stay in relationships that make them miserable because they fear being single. Think about how many people keep friendships that drain their energy because they fear having an empty contact list. Think about how many people agree with things they do not believe, laugh at jokes they do not find funny, and shrink themselves into smaller and smaller versions of who they really are, all because they cannot stomach the idea of standing alone. That is not connection. That is emotional hostage-taking, and the captor is your own fear. When you learn to be comfortable alone, something remarkable starts to shift. You stop making desperate choices. You stop clinging to people who treat you poorly. You stop abandoning your own values just to fit in. You stop saying yes when everything inside you is screaming no. And you start making decisions from a place of strength instead of a place of fear. That shift changes your entire life, not overnight, not in some dramatic cinematic moment, but slowly, quietly, in ways that accumulate until one day you look in the mirror and realize you actually like the person staring back at you, not because someone told you to, but because you finally gave yourself the space to become that person. Your quiet season is not your punishment. It might be your preparation. And the version of you that emerges from this solitude might be the strongest, most authentic version of yourself you have ever known. So stop apologizing for spending time alone. Stop treating your quiet life like a problem to be fixed. Stop scrolling through other people's highlight reels and assuming their noise means they are happier than you. Some of the loudest people you see online are the most broken behind the scenes, and some of the quietest people you know are building something extraordinary that the world has not seen yet. Maybe you are one of those people. Maybe the silence you have been so afraid of is actually the classroom where your greatest lessons are being taught. Chapter 4. Build yourself in silence. Let the results make the noise. There is a pattern I have noticed, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The people who talk the most about what they are going to become are usually the ones who stay exactly where they are, and the people who say almost nothing are the ones who quietly transform their entire lives while nobody is paying attention. There is actually a psychological reason for this. A researcher named Peter Gollwitzer at New York University conducted a series of studies showing that when people announce their goals publicly, their brain often registers the announcement itself as a form of accomplishment. You tell everyone you're going to write a book, you get the dopamine hit of social approval, and suddenly the motivation to actually write the book decreases Your brain already got the reward without doing the work. This is why so many New Year's resolutions die by February. This is why so many people post about their goals on social media and never follow through. They are feeding on the applause of intention instead of doing the unglamorous work of execution. Building yourself in silence is the antidote to that trap. And I want to be clear about what building in silence actually means, because I think people misunderstand it. It does not mean becoming secretive or antisocial. It does not mean hiding from the world. It means making a conscious decision to let your actions carry more weight than your words. It means choosing to invest your energy into progress instead of performance. Because here is the truth. Most of what actually changes your life is boring. It is not cinematic. It is not Instagram worthy. Nobody is going to clap for you when you wake up at 6 in the morning to work on a skill nobody knows about yet. Nobody is going to celebrate when you choose to read a book instead of scrolling for 2 hours. Nobody is going to send you a congratulatory text when you sit down and face the financial mess you have been avoiding for months. The real work of transformation is unglamorous. It happens at kitchen tables at midnight. It happens in journals nobody will ever read. It happens in gyms at 5 in the morning when the only audience is the reflection in the mirror. It happens in therapy sessions. It happens in the 10 minutes of meditation you do before the chaos of the day begins. It happens in every tiny decision to choose growth when comfort was the easier option. And because nobody sees that work, most people do not respect it. They respect the end result. They respect the confidence, the success, the peace, the emotional stability that eventually shows up. But they skip right past the invisible process that created all of it. You cannot do that. You have to fall in love with the process itself, not just the destination. Because if your only motivation is the moment people finally notice, you will quit long before that moment arrives. The gap between starting and being seen is where 90% of people give up. They start a business and quit after 3 months because nobody bought anything yet. They start working out and quit after 6 weeks because nobody complimented their body yet. They start healing emotionally and give up because their life still feels messy. But what if you kept going? What if you decided that your growth was never about impressing other people in the first place? What if your only metric for success was whether you showed up for yourself today, regardless of who noticed? That shift in mindset is everything. I want to tell you about a concept that the ancient Stoic philosophers understood deeply, a concept that modern culture has largely forgotten. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, who wrote one of the most influential personal journals in Western history, never intended for his writings to be published. He was writing to himself, reminding himself to stay disciplined, to control his emotions, to focus on what mattered. He was building himself in silence in the most literal sense possible. And those private journal entries went on to shape philosophy, psychology, and personal development for over 2,000 years. He did not write for applause. He wrote for clarity. And that is the kind of energy you need to bring to your own growth. Stop building yourself for the audience. Build yourself for yourself. Because when you do that, something interesting happens. The pressure drops. You stop feeling the need to perform your progress for social media. You stop comparing your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. You stop feeling behind because behind according to who? Behind according to some imaginary timeline that society created? The only timeline that matters is yours. And on your timeline, you are exactly where you need to be right now. Even if that place feels quiet. Even if that place feels slow. Even if that place feels invisible. There is a beautiful Japanese concept called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement through small, consistent changes, not dramatic overhauls, not overnight transformations, just 1% better today than yesterday. That is it. 1% feels like nothing in the moment, but compounded over months and years, 1% daily improvement creates a completely unrecognizable life. The people who actually transform are not the people who had one big breakthrough moment. They are the people who showed up every day and made small choices that nobody else noticed. They chose the salad when nobody was watching. They chose the book when nobody was checking. They chose the early morning when nobody was counting. They chose growth over comfort so many times that eventually it stopped being a choice and became their identity. That is what building yourself in silence looks like. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is repetitive, consistent, and unglamorous, and it works. So let me ask you something honest. How are you spending the hours nobody sees? When you are alone on a Saturday night and there is no one to impress, what do you do with that time? When you wake up and nobody is holding you accountable, do you hold yourself accountable? Because your private habits are the most honest measure of who you are becoming. Not the version of yourself you show the world. The version of yourself that exists when no one is watching. That is the real you. And that real you is either growing quietly or stagnating quietly. There is no neutral. Every day you are voting for the person you are becoming. Every Netflix binge is a vote. Every workout is a vote. Every hour spent learning a skill is a vote. Every night spent doom scrolling is a vote. And the votes are being counted, whether you are paying attention or not. So start voting wisely. Start voting for the version of yourself you actually want to become. Not the version that is easiest to be. Not the version that requires the least effort. The version that 3 years from now you will look back on and be genuinely grateful you had the discipline to build. Nobody needs to see the blueprint. Nobody needs to approve the plan. Nobody needs to understand your vision right now. Results speak louder than explanations ever will. And when your results eventually become visible, and they will if you stay consistent, people will ask how you did it. And you will smile because you will know the answer. You did it quietly. You did it alone. You did it on mornings when nobody was watching and nights when nobody cared. You did it through boring, repetitive, invisible discipline that most people are simply not willing to commit to. And that is exactly what made it work. A disciplined life lived quietly will always outperform a loud life built on performance. Always. Because discipline does not need an audience. It does not need permission. It does not need applause. It just needs you to show up. Again and again and again. Until the silence you were once afraid of becomes the foundation of everything you are proud of. Chapter 5. Stop outsourcing your emotional stability. I want to have an honest conversation with you about something that most people are not willing to admit. And it might sting a little, but I think you're ready to hear it. A lot of the emotional suffering you experience is not because life is unusually cruel to you. It is because you have been handing the remote control of your emotions to other people, and then wondering why your inner world feels so chaotic. Think about it. When someone you care about does not text you back, how quickly does your mood shift? When someone criticizes you, even casually, how long do you carry that weight? When someone you trusted walks away from your life, how much of your identity walks away with them? If you are being honest, the answer is probably too much. And I say that without judgment, because I think most of us have been there. We grow up believing that love means needing people, that connection means depending on people, that closeness means giving someone the power to determine how we feel about ourselves on any given day. But that is not love. That is emotional outsourcing, and it is one of the most exhausting ways to live. Here is what I mean. When your happiness depends on whether someone pays attention to you, you are not in control of your happiness. They are. When your confidence depends on whether someone validates your effort, you are not in control of your confidence. They are. When your peace depends on whether someone stays in your life, you are not in control of your peace. They are. And the problem is not that those people are necessarily bad. The problem is that people are human. They are inconsistent. They get busy. They get distracted. They deal with their own pain, their own chaos, their own emotional limitations, and when they inevitably fail to show up for you in the way you needed, your entire world tilts sideways, not because something catastrophic happened, but because your emotional infrastructure was built on something inherently unstable, someone else's behavior. I am not saying you should become a robot. I am not saying emotions are weakness. Emotions are one of the most beautiful parts of being human. The ability to feel deeply, to love, to grieve, to be moved by a song or a sunset or a stranger's kindness, that is not something to suppress. But there is a critical difference between feeling your emotions and being controlled by them, between appreciating people's support and requiring it to function. Dr. Susan David, a psychologist at Harvard Medical School and the author of Emotional Agility, talks about this distinction in a way that I think is incredibly useful. She describes emotional agility as the ability to be with your emotions with curiosity and compassion, without being hijacked by them. It is not about positive thinking. It is not about suppressing negative feelings. It is about developing the internal capacity to feel difficult things without falling apart. And that capacity is not something you are born with. It is something you build, often through the exact experiences that feel like they are breaking you right now. Every time you survive a disappointment without letting it destroy your week, you get a little stronger. Every time someone lets you down and you find a way to keep going, your emotional foundation gets a little more solid. Every time you sit with loneliness, instead of desperately reaching for the first distraction available, you teach yourself that you can handle more than you thought. These are not dramatic moments. Nobody writes songs about the Tuesday afternoon you decided not to spiral after a rejection email. Nobody makes movies about the Sunday night you chose to journal through your frustration instead of starting an argument. But those quiet moments of emotional self-regulation are where real inner strength is forged. Now, I want to be careful here because I think there is a toxic version of this message that floats around the internet, and I do not want to feed into it. The idea that asking for help is weak. that needing people is shameful, that truly strong people never lean on anyone. That is not what I am saying at all. Asking for help is brave. Vulnerability is courageous. Leaning on people during hard seasons is human and healthy. But there is a difference between leaning on people and collapsing without them. There is a difference between appreciating a hand and refusing to stand unless someone offers one. The goal is not to need nobody. The goal is to be okay if, for a season, nobody is available. To know in your bones that you can survive a lonely chapter without losing yourself entirely. Because that knowledge, that deep internal knowing that you can carry yourself when you have to, is what real emotional freedom feels like. And once you have it, your relationships actually get better. This is the part nobody expects. When you stop depending on people for your emotional survival, you stop bringing desperation into your connections. You stop clinging. You stop testing. You stop monitoring every interaction for signs that someone is about to leave. You stop reading into every unanswered message. You stop keeping score. Instead, you start showing up in relationships from a place of wholeness instead of emptiness. You start choosing people because you genuinely enjoy them, not because you are terrified of being without them. And that kind of energy attracts different kinds of people, healthier people, people who are also building themselves, people who add to your life instead of becoming your entire life. But it starts with you. It starts with the decision to become your own emotional anchor. Not because the world is cruel and nobody cares, but because you deserve the peace that comes from knowing your stability does not depend on something you cannot control. You have survived every bad day you have ever had. Every single one. Your track record for getting through difficult moments is 100% so far. That is not luck. That is proof of something real inside you, something resilient, something that does not need constant external reassurance to keep going. Trust that part of yourself. Build on it. Let it grow. Because the day you stop placing your emotional well-being in other people's hands is the day you finally stop living at the mercy of their choices. And that kind of freedom, the freedom to feel pain without being destroyed by it, to feel loneliness without being consumed by it, to feel disappointment without being defined by it, that is the kind of freedom that changes everything. Chapter 6. Your quiet season is not a dead season. It is a growing season. There is a metaphor I keep coming back to, and I think it is one of the most useful ways to understand what might be happening in your life right now. In the middle of a Minnesota winter, if you walk outside and look at the trees, you will see nothing. Bare branches, frozen ground, no leaves, no blossoms, no visible sign of life. If you did not know any better, you would assume those trees were dead. Finished. Done. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary is happening. The roots are deepening. The tree is conserving energy. It is preparing silently and invisibly for the explosion of growth that will come in spring. All of that emptiness you see above ground is not death. It is preparation. Your life works the same way. There are seasons that feel barren, seasons where nothing seems to be growing, where your effort feels pointless, where your progress is invisible to everyone, including yourself. And during those seasons, it is incredibly tempting to believe the lie that nothing is happening, that you are wasting your time, that everyone else is blooming while you are stuck in frozen ground. But what if the opposite is true? What if these quiet seasons are exactly when your deepest growth is taking root? I have talked to so many people who look back on their loneliest, most difficult periods and say the same thing. I hated it at the time, but that season made me who I am. And they are not saying that to romanticize suffering. They are saying it because it is true. Because some lessons simply cannot be learned when life is comfortable and everyone is cheering for you. Comfort teaches you very little about yourself. When everything is going well, when support surrounds you, when life feels easy, you never really discover what you are made of. You never find out how deep your discipline runs. You never learn what you're actually capable of when the safety net disappears. But solitude, real solitude, the kind where you have nothing to lean on but your own decisions, that teaches you everything. It teaches you what you actually value versus what you thought you valued because someone else told you to. It teaches you which habits are serving your growth and which ones are just comfortable distractions. It teaches you what kind of person you become when nobody is watching. And honestly, that is the most important version of yourself to understand. The problem is that most people waste their quiet seasons. Instead of using solitude as a classroom, they use it as an escape room. They fill every silent moment with noise, endless scrolling, binge-watching shows they do not even enjoy, jumping into relationships they know are wrong just to avoid being alone, staying busy with things that do not matter, so they never have to sit still long enough to confront what does. I get it. Sitting with yourself is uncomfortable, especially in the beginning, because when the distractions fall away, what you are left with is you, your fears, your regrets, your unprocessed pain, the dreams you abandoned, the boundaries you never set, the version of yourself you have been avoiding. But here's the thing, you cannot outrun yourself forever, and the longer you avoid that confrontation, the louder it gets. The anxiety gets louder, the emptiness gets louder, the sense that something is missing gets louder. Not because you are broken, but because there is a part of you that desperately wants to grow, and you keep drowning it out with noise. What would happen if, instead of running from your quiet season, you leaned into it? What if you treated this time alone not as a punishment, but as a gift? A rare window where your attention is not being pulled in 15 directions, where you actually have the bandwidth to think about your life with clarity, where you can ask yourself the questions that matter and give yourself the honest answers you have been avoiding. Questions like, what am I tolerating that I should not be? What am I avoiding that I know I need to face? Who am I becoming through my daily habits? And is that the person I actually want to be? These are not comfortable questions, but they are transformative ones. And you are far more likely to answer them honestly when you are alone than when you are surrounded by noise. There is a reason why so many of the world's greatest thinkers, creators, and leaders deliberately sought solitude during their most important periods of growth. Winston Churchill, during the so-called wilderness years of the 1930s, when he was politically isolated and largely ignored, used that period of forced solitude to write, to study, and to develop the strategic thinking that would later help him lead Britain through its darkest hour. Those years of isolation were not wasted. They were the furnace that forged his leadership. You may not be leading a nation, but you are leading your own life, and the quality of that leadership depends on how willing you are to spend time alone with your own thoughts, your own habits, and your own truth. So let me challenge you with something practical. Instead of dreading your alone time, start designing it. Make it intentional. Give structure to your solitude so it becomes productive instead of painful. Start a morning routine that belongs entirely to you, not something you saw on a productivity influencer's page, something that actually makes you feel grounded and focused. Maybe that is 15 minutes of journaling. Maybe it is a walk without headphones. Maybe it is reading 10 pages of a book that challenges the way you think. Whatever it is, make it yours. Make it sacred. Protect it the way you would protect an appointment with someone important. Because it is an appointment with someone important. It is an appointment with yourself. Use your evenings wisely. Instead of collapsing into passive consumption every night, dedicate even 30 minutes to something that moves your life forward. Learn a new skill on a free online platform. Write down 3 things you accomplished today, no matter how small. Plan tomorrow before it arrives instead of letting it happen to you. These are not revolutionary ideas. They are simple, almost too simple. And that is exactly why most people skip them, because we have been conditioned to believe that transformation requires something dramatic, a life-changing event, a sudden bolt of inspiration, a guru who hands you the secret formula. But transformation is not dramatic. Transformation is mundane. It is the accumulation of hundreds of small, boring, unglamorous choices made alone when nobody was watching and nobody cared. And those choices, repeated consistently over weeks and months and years, will build a version of you that the person reading this right now can barely imagine. So do not waste this season. I know it feels heavy. I know it feels slow. I know some days the silence feels deafening, and you wonder if anybody in the world even remembers you exist. But you are not being forgotten. You are being forged, and one day you will step out of this quiet season with a clarity, a strength, and a self-awareness that none of your noisier seasons ever gave you. Not because suffering is romantic, but because growth requires space. And right now, whether you chose it or not, you have that space. Use it. Every book you read in silence is shaping your mind. Every habit you build alone is shaping your character. Every morning you choose discipline over comfort is shaping your future. And every night you go to bed knowing you gave today your honest effort, even without applause, is shaping the kind of person who does not need the world's permission to keep becoming better. That person is already inside you. The quiet season is not keeping them hidden. It is giving them room to emerge. So stop fighting the silence. Start using it. Because your quiet season might just be the most important chapter of your life, if you are brave enough to let it be. Chapter 7. Build a life that stands on its own. There is a question I want you to sit with for a moment, and I want you to answer it honestly. If every single person in your life disappeared tomorrow, every friend, every partner, every family member who supports you, would you still know who you are? Not who they told you to be, not who you became to keep them comfortable, not the version of yourself you perform so people will stay, but the actual, unfiltered, unedited you. Most people cannot answer that question. And it is not because they are weak. It is because they have never been asked. They have spent so many years building their identity around other people that they genuinely do not know what is left when those people are removed from the equation. Their confidence is borrowed from compliments. Their motivation is borrowed from accountability partners. Their sense of direction is borrowed from whoever is currently closest to them. And on the surface, this looks fine. It looks normal. It looks like healthy human connection. But underneath, it is a house built on sand. And the moment those external supports shift, and they always shift eventually, everything starts to crack. I am not saying relationships do not matter. They matter enormously. Love, friendship, community. These are some of the richest parts of being alive. But there is a crucial difference between a life that is enhanced by other people and a life that depends on other people to exist. Think about it, like a house. A well-built house has a strong foundation, solid walls, a roof that holds. When you invite people inside, they make the house warmer, livelier, more joyful. But if those people leave for a while, the house still stands. It does not collapse. It does not stop being a house. It is complete on its own. The people inside are a gift, not a structural requirement. That is what a self-built life looks like. And that is what I want for you. But building that kind of life requires something most people are not willing to do. It requires you to stop making other people the foundation of your identity. It requires you to stop measuring your worth by who stays and who leaves. It requires you to develop a relationship with yourself that is so solid, so grounded, so honest, that external changes cannot demolish your internal world. And I know that sounds intimidating, but you are already closer to it than you think. Every time you made a decision that was true to who you are, even when it was unpopular, you were building that foundation. Every time you held a boundary that someone pressured you to drop, you were reinforcing those walls. Every time you sat with your own pain, instead of immediately running to someone else to fix it, you were proving to yourself that the house can stand on its own. Those moments count. They count more than you realize. Now here's where it gets interesting. When you build a life that stands on its own, something paradoxical happens. Your relationships actually become healthier, not worse. Healthier. This is the part that confuses people. They think emotional independence means emotional distance. They think building a strong internal foundation means pushing people away. But the opposite is true. When you are no longer terrified of being alone, you stop tolerating things that hurt you. You stop staying in relationships out of fear. You stop performing a false version of yourself to keep people around. You stop accepting disrespect because you are scared that loneliness is worse than mistreatment. Instead, you start choosing people from a position of strength. You start setting standards. You start attracting people who are drawn to the real you, not the mask you have been wearing. And the connections that form on that foundation are incomparably deeper than the ones built on desperation. A person who can walk alone is never trapped. They stay in relationships because they want to, not because they have to. They love people freely because their love is not contaminated by fear. They give generously because they are not secretly keeping score, waiting for people to repay them with validation. That is the kind of person most people dream of becoming, but few ever do. Because becoming that person requires you to go through the uncomfortable process of building yourself from the inside out. And that process usually happens during the exact lonely seasons most people are trying to escape. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. The people who leave your life are not always villains. Sometimes they are catalysts. Sometimes their departure is the exact thing that forces you to finally build the foundation you have been neglecting. Sometimes losing someone is what makes you realize you never had a solid relationship with yourself in the first place. And that realization, as painful as it is, can become the starting point of the most important construction project of your life. Building a self that does not crumble when the world shifts. A self that has its own values, independent of popular opinion. Its own goals, independent of who approves. Its own peace, independent of who stays or goes. Its own confidence, independent of how many people are clapping. That self is not built overnight. It is built through 1,000 small decisions made in quiet rooms where nobody is keeping track. It is built through the commitment to know yourself honestly, to invest in your own growth seriously, and to stop handing the blueprints of your life to people who did not ask for them and do not know what to do with them. Your life is yours to build, not anyone else's. And the sooner you take full ownership of that truth, the sooner the foundation starts getting stronger. Chapter 8. Learn to walk alone without losing yourself. There is a moment that comes in almost everyone's life, a moment where you realize you are standing somewhere you did not expect to be. Alone, not by choice, not as part of some grand plan for personal growth. Just alone because life happened. People left. Circumstances changed, and suddenly the path ahead has no one on it but you. That moment is terrifying. I am not going to sugarcoat it because it goes against everything we are wired for. Human beings are social animals. We evolved in tribes. Our nervous systems are literally designed to seek connection, to feel safe in groups, to panic when we sense isolation. So when life puts you in a position where you have to walk forward without a hand to hold, every alarm bell in your body starts ringing. But here is what those alarm bells will not tell you. Some of the most defining chapters of your life will be written during seasons when you walk alone. Not because loneliness is noble. Not because suffering builds character in some poetic, romanticized way, but because there are certain things about yourself that you will never discover until the safety net disappears. Strengths you did not know you had. Resilience you never tested. Clarity you could never access while you were busy managing everyone else's emotions and expectations. Walking alone strips away the noise and leaves you with the signal. And the signal is you. I think one of the biggest fears people carry, bigger than the fear of failure, bigger even than the fear of rejection, is the fear of truly seeing themselves. Because when you are alone, there is nowhere to hide. There are no distractions thick enough to block out the questions that solitude forces you to face. Am I living the life I actually want, or the life I think I am supposed to want? Am I holding on to people and habits that are actively making me weaker? Am I afraid of who I might become if I stopped shrinking myself to make other people comfortable? These are not easy questions. And most people spend their entire lives constructing elaborate systems of distraction specifically designed to avoid them. But the people who eventually find peace, real peace, Not the temporary kind that depends on everything going perfectly, but deep, stable, unshakable peace are the people who sat with those questions alone and had the courage to answer honestly. I want to tell you something about walking alone that nobody warns you about. It gets easier. Not immediately. The first few weeks, maybe months, of a lonely season can feel like you are dragging yourself through wet concrete. Every day feels heavy. Every evening feels endless. The silence that used to feel peaceful starts feeling oppressive, and you catch yourself reaching for your phone just to feel some evidence that you still exist in someone else's world. That is normal. That is withdrawal. You are withdrawing from emotional dependence the same way a person withdraws from any habit they have relied on for too long. And like any withdrawal, the early stages are the hardest. But if you push through, something shifts. The heaviness starts lifting. The silence stops feeling threatening and starts feeling spacious. You begin noticing things you missed before. The way a morning feels when you're not immediately checking for validation. The way your thoughts sound when they are not competing with someone else's opinions. The way your energy changes when you stop pouring it into people and situations that were draining you dry. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start to like who you are when nobody else is around. Not in an arrogant way, in a quiet, settled way. A way that does not need external confirmation. You start trusting your own judgment. You start making decisions without polling 15 people for their opinion first. You start doing things because they feel right to you, not because they will impress someone else. That is what walking alone teaches you. It teaches you self-trust. And self-trust might be the most valuable asset a human being can develop because everything else in your life flows from it. When you trust yourself, you stop second-guessing every decision. When you trust yourself, you stop needing constant reassurance that you are on the right path. When you trust yourself, you stop abandoning your instincts just because someone else disagrees. When you trust yourself, you stop tolerating situations that your gut has been telling you to leave for months. Self-trust is not something you can buy or borrow or download. It is built through experience. Specifically, through the experience of relying on yourself during difficult seasons and discovering that you are more capable than you feared. Every problem you solve alone deposits something into your self-trust account. Every hard decision you make without someone holding your hand adds to it. Every time you sit with discomfort instead of running from it, the balance grows. And over time, that account becomes so substantial that external validation stops feeling like a necessity and starts feeling like a nice bonus. That is a powerful shift. Because when validation becomes a bonus rather than a requirement, you stop being controllable. You stop being manipulable. You stop being the person who stays in bad situations because the fear of leaving feels worse than the pain of staying. A person who can walk alone becomes emotionally untouchable, not in a cold, detached way, but in the way that means their peace is self-generated, not externally dependent. They can enjoy company without needing it. They can receive love without hoarding it. They can lose people without losing themselves. And that is the goal, not to become someone who never needs anyone, but to become someone who is whole on their own, so that every relationship they enter is a choice, not a lifeline. I know some of you reading this are in the middle of a season that feels impossible, a season where the loneliness is not philosophical, it is physical. It is Friday nights with no plans. It is holidays with empty chairs. It is milestones with nobody to share them with. And I am not going to insult you by pretending that does not hurt. It hurts. Deeply. Legitimately. And you are allowed to feel that hurt without anyone telling you to just stay positive. But I also want you to know that this season has an expiration date. Not because someone is going to magically appear and rescue you, but because you are going to rescue yourself. Day by day, decision by decision, you're going to build a kind of internal stability that makes loneliness survivable and then manageable, and then eventually transformative. Not every alone season is a tragedy. Some are incubators, some are cocoons, and the person who emerges from the other side of this chapter, the one who walked alone and did not break, that person is going to have a strength that no amount of comfort could have given them. The caterpillar does not know it is becoming a butterfly while it is dissolving inside the cocoon. It just knows that everything it used to be is falling apart. But the falling apart is not the end. It is the process. You are not falling apart. You are being restructured. And the version of you that comes out of this, the one who learned to walk alone without losing themselves, is going to be the version of you that finally feels free. Free from the fear of abandonment. Free from the need for constant approval. Free from the exhausting performance of being whoever other people need you to be. That freedom is not far away. It is being built right now, in the quiet, in the struggle, in every moment you keep walking, even though nobody is walking beside you. Keep going, not because the journey is easy, but because the person you are becoming on this journey is worth every difficult step. Walking alone is not a life sentence. It is a training ground. And the skills you are developing right now, self-trust, emotional resilience, internal peace, those skills will serve you for the rest of your life. Long after this season ends, long after the loneliness fades, long after people eventually show up who are worthy of the person you have become, those people will come. But you will not need them. You will choose them. And that will make all the difference. Chapter 9. Your greatest transformation will happen when nobody is watching. There is a lie that modern culture keeps telling you, and it is so deeply embedded in how we think that most people never even question it. The lie is this: transformation is supposed to be visible. We have been taught that change looks like a before and after photo. That growth looks like a public announcement. That progress means something the world can see, measure, and applaud. And because of this, we have developed a deeply unhealthy relationship with invisible progress. If nobody can see the change, we assume the change is not happening. But I want you to consider something. What if the most important transformation of your life is happening right now, in a way that nobody around you can detect? What if the version of you that will eventually walk with more confidence, more peace, more clarity, more emotional stability than you have ever known is being assembled silently, piece by piece, in the exact season you are currently trying to escape? Because that is how transformation actually works, not in the spotlight, in the shadows. Think about it this way. When a building is being constructed, the most critical phase is the one nobody admires, the foundation work. The months spent digging, pouring concrete, laying steel underground where nobody will ever see it. If you walked past a construction site during that phase, you might think nothing was happening. But everything was happening. The invisible work was making the visible result possible. Your life is no different. The emotional strength you are building during this quiet season is foundational work. The discipline you are developing when nobody is watching is structural. The self-awareness you are gaining through solitude is the steel reinforcement that will hold everything else together when life eventually tests you, and it will test you. But most people abandon the construction project before the foundation is complete. They quit during the invisible phase because the invisible phase is boring, lonely, and unrewarding. Nobody is posting about their foundation work on social media. Nobody is celebrating the fact that they journaled for 30 days straight. Nobody is throwing a party because they finally stopped texting their ex at 2 in the morning. These are invisible victories. And invisible victories are the only ones that truly change your life. I want to talk about something that happens to people as they grow, something that nobody prepares you for. You get quieter, not because you have less to say, but because you realize how much energy you were wasting saying things that did not need to be said, proving things that did not need to be proven, explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand anyway. There is a reason why maturity and silence often walk together. It is because mature people have learned something that younger or less experienced versions of themselves had not figured out yet. That not every thought needs to be shared. Not every accomplishment needs to be announced. Not every emotion needs to be performed for an audience. This is counterintuitive in a world that rewards noise. We live in a culture that celebrates the loudest voice, the most dramatic story, the biggest reveal. Social media has turned personal growth into a spectator sport, where people document every workout, every therapy breakthrough, every motivational morning routine as if transformation requires witnesses to be real. But real transformation is almost never loud. It is the quiet decision to stop drinking alone on weeknights. It is the private commitment to save money instead of spending emotionally. It is the internal shift from I need people to approve of me to I need to approve of myself. It is the moment you stop performing recovery and actually start recovering. Nobody will applaud those moments, but those moments are the ones that change your trajectory. I want you to think about someone you admire, not a celebrity, someone real, someone whose presence feels grounded, whose confidence feels earned, whose peace feels genuine. Now ask yourself, do you think that person became that way through public performance? Or do you think there were years of invisible work behind that stability? Years of lonely mornings, difficult conversations with themselves, quiet discipline that nobody documented? The answer is almost always the latter. Because the people who feel the most real are usually the ones who built themselves the most privately. There is a freedom that comes from letting go of the need to be seen. When you stop performing your growth for an audience, you suddenly have so much more energy to actually grow. You stop curating your life and start living it. You stop worrying about whether your progress looks impressive and start focusing on whether your progress is genuine. And genuine progress does not care about aesthetics. Genuine progress is messy. It involves setbacks. It involves days where you feel like you have gone backward. It involves mornings where the old version of you tries to take the wheel back and you have to fight to stay on course. It involves crying in your car and then walking into work like nothing happened. It involves forgiving yourself for the same mistake for the 15th time. That is what real change looks like. Not a clean, linear upward trajectory. A jagged, frustrating, deeply human process of becoming someone slightly better than you were yesterday, and then doing it again tomorrow. And nobody needs to watch that happen. Nobody needs to validate it. Nobody needs to give you permission to keep going. You just keep going. Quietly, persistently, with the kind of stubborn, unglamorous consistency that nobody writes about, but that builds everything worth having. There is a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. The idea that people can experience profound positive transformation as a result of struggling through highly challenging life circumstances. Not despite the struggle, because of it. Researchers at the University of North Carolina found that people who experienced significant adversity often reported greater appreciation for life, more meaningful relationships, increased personal strength, recognition of new possibilities, and deepened spiritual or existential understanding. But here is the part they do not put in the headline. That growth almost always happened privately. It happened in the silence between the crisis and the recovery. It happened in the moments nobody saw. It happened in the invisible space between who someone used to be and who they were becoming. You might be in that invisible space right now, and I know it does not feel like growth. It feels like survival. It feels like you are barely holding it together some days. But survival during a difficult season is growth. Continuing when everything inside you wants to quit is growth. Waking up and trying again after a day that completely defeated you is growth. You are growing right now, even if you cannot see it, even if nobody else can see it, even if the only evidence is that you are still here, still reading, still searching for something that reminds you that your life is not over. It is not over. It is under construction. And the most important parts of the building are the ones nobody can see yet. Chapter 10. One day, you will be grateful you did not quit. I need you to hear something, and I need you to hear it clearly, because this might be the most important thing in this entire conversation. There will be a version of you that exists in the future, a version with more peace, more confidence, more emotional stability, more clarity about what matters, and that version of you will look back on this exact season of your life and feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Not gratitude that it was easy. It was not easy. Not gratitude that it was painless. It was painful. But gratitude that you did not stop, that you kept waking up, that you kept trying, that you kept building even when building felt pointless, that you refused to let the loneliness, the exhaustion, the doubt, the invisible progress convince you to quit on yourself. I know that sounds impossible right now. When you are in the middle of a difficult season, the idea that you will one day be grateful for it sounds almost offensive, like someone telling you to appreciate the rain while you are drowning in it. But I am not asking you to appreciate this season right now. I am asking you to trust that this season is producing something inside you that comfort never could. Because here's a truth that is hard to accept but impossible to deny once you have lived long enough. Struggle does not just build character in some vague greeting card way. Struggle literally rewires your brain. Neuroscience has shown that when you push through adversity, your brain strengthens the neural pathways associated with resilience, emotional regulation, and problem solving. Every time you face something difficult and survive it, your brain learns that difficulty is survivable. And over time, that learning becomes automatic. This is why people who have been through hard seasons often handle future challenges with a calm that surprises everyone around them. It is not because they do not feel stress. It is because their nervous system has been trained by experience to know that stress is temporary and survivable. You are in training right now, whether you realize it or not. Every day you continue moving forward without the support you wish you had. You are training your brain to function independently. Every time you push through emotional exhaustion and still show up for yourself, you are strengthening circuits in your mind that will serve you for decades to come. Every lonely night where you choose to do something productive instead of something destructive, you are laying down new patterns that will eventually become your default. This is not wasted time. This is the most productive time of your life. You just cannot see the product yet. Let me tell you what I see when I look at someone who is going through a hard season alone. I do not see weakness. I do not see failure. I see a person whose capacity for strength has not been fully revealed yet. I see a person who is being stretched beyond what they thought they could handle and who is handling it anyway. I see a person whose future self will be built on the foundation that this present suffering is creating. And I want you to start seeing yourself that way too, not as someone who is falling behind, not as someone who is losing the race, not as someone whose life is less valuable because it is quieter, lonelier, or harder than the lives around them, but as someone who is under construction, someone whose blueprint is still being drawn, someone whose foundation is being reinforced right now so that what gets built on top of it can withstand anything. There is a quote often attributed to Winston Churchill, although its true origin is debated, that says, "If you are going through hell, keep going." That is it. That is the entire strategy. Keep going. Not because the path is clear, not because you know where it leads, not because someone promised you it gets better, but because stopping in the middle of hell is worse than walking through it. And you are walking through it right now, today. With every decision you make to keep showing up for yourself, you are taking another step through a season that will not last forever, even though it feels like it will. Most people who quit do so not because they are incapable of continuing, but because they lose perspective. They get so consumed by the difficulty of the present moment that they forget the present moment is temporary. They start believing that the way things feel right now is the way things will feel forever, that the loneliness is permanent, that the struggle is permanent, that the invisibility is permanent. It is not. Nothing is permanent, including this. One day, and that day might be closer than you think, you are going to wake up and realize that something has shifted. Not because life suddenly handed you a gift, but because all those quiet mornings of discipline, all those lonely nights of effort, all those invisible moments of choosing growth over comfort finally reached the tipping point, and the life you have been quietly building will start becoming visible. Your confidence will feel different, not because someone gave it to you, because you built it yourself, brick by brick, during a season where nobody was helping. Your emotional stability will feel different, not because circumstances improved, because you improved during difficult circumstances, and people around you will notice. They will say things like, "You seem different, you seem calmer, you seem more confident, you seem at peace," and you will smile, because you will know exactly what it cost to become that person. You will remember every morning you showed up with no one watching. Every night you kept going with nothing but your own determination. Every time you chose yourself when it would have been so much easier to give up. That memory will not be a source of pain. It will be a source of pride, the deepest kind of pride, the kind that does not need to be displayed, the kind that sits quietly in your chest and reminds you that you are capable of far more than you once believed. And on that day, you will feel the gratitude I described at the beginning of this chapter, not for the pain itself, but for your reflection, to let it be the final chapter of your story. You did not quit, and that made all the difference. Chapter 11. Stop chasing people. Start choosing yourself. Let me paint a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You send a message to someone you care about. Something real, something vulnerable, something that took a little courage to type out. And then you wait. An hour passes, 3 hours pass, a day, and every minute of that silence eats away at something inside you, not because the message was urgent, but because your sense of worth is quietly tied to whether people respond. Or maybe it looks different for you. Maybe you are the person who constantly adjusts who you are depending on who you are around. One personality for this group, another for that group, a softer version here, a tougher version there, always shape-shifting, always adapting, always performing, because somewhere deep inside you believe that the real you is not enough to make people stay. Or maybe it shows up in how you handle endings. A friendship fades, and you feel it in your bones for months. Someone distances themselves, and you replay every interaction trying to figure out what you did wrong. A relationship ends, and you lose not just the person, but your entire sense of self, because you had woven your identity so tightly around theirs that you cannot remember where they ended and you began. If any of this sounds like you, I want to be very clear about something. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not too needy. You are someone who has been investing an enormous amount of emotional energy in other people while investing almost nothing in yourself. And the imbalance is slowly draining you. Chasing people is one of the most exhausting things a human being can do. And I use the word chasing deliberately, because that is what it often becomes. Not connecting, not relating, not sharing, chasing, pursuing people who are walking away, seeking validation from people who are not offering it, begging for attention from people who have already shown you through their actions that your attention is not a priority for them. And every time you chase someone who is not choosing you back, you send a quiet message to yourself. A message that says, "My love is only valuable if someone accepts it. My effort only matters if someone acknowledges it. My existence only counts if someone notices it." That message is a lie. But if you repeat it often enough through your behavior, your brain starts to believe it. And once your brain believes it, Everything in your life gets filtered through that distorted lens. Every unread text becomes proof that you are not enough. Every canceled plan becomes confirmation that you are forgettable. Every person who leaves becomes evidence that you are fundamentally unworthy of staying for. But none of that is true. People leaving your life is not always a reflection of your value. Sometimes it is a reflection of their capacity. Sometimes it is a reflection of different seasons, different priorities, different trajectories. Sometimes two good people simply grow in different directions, and that does not mean either one of them failed. The real failure is not losing people. The real failure is losing yourself in the process of trying to keep them. And I think that is what happens to a lot of people. They pour so much into being wanted that they forget to become someone they want to be. They spend so much energy performing for other people's approval that they have nothing left for their own growth. They chase and chase and chase, and one day they stop and look around and realize they are completely lost, not because the world abandoned them, but because they abandoned themselves. So here is my challenge to you, and it is one of the hardest things I will ask in this entire conversation. Stop chasing. Just stop. Not forever. Not in a cold, bitter, I do not need any one way, but in a clear-eyed, honest recognition that the energy you have been pouring into people who are not reciprocating could be redirected into building a version of yourself that you are genuinely proud of. What would happen if you took all the mental energy you spend worrying about who likes you and invested it in becoming someone you like? What if you took all the hours you spend curating yourself for other people's approval and spent them on genuine self-improvement? What if you took the emotional bandwidth you use to manage other people's perceptions of you and redirected it toward actually understanding yourself? I will tell you what would happen. You would become magnetic, not in some manipulative, self-help guru way, but in the way that people who are genuinely at peace with themselves naturally draw others in, because authenticity is rare, and people can feel it when someone walks into a room and they are not performing, not seeking approval, not adjusting themselves based on who is watching. There is a gravity to that. People are drawn to it because most of them are exhausted from performing too, and seeing someone who has stopped gives them permission to consider stopping themselves. The paradox of chasing people is that the harder you chase, the more people pull away. And the more you focus on yourself, the more the right people gravitate towards you naturally. Not because you are playing a game, but because your energy changes. Desperation repels. Wholeness attracts. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you have. Whatever consumes your attention shapes your reality. If your attention is constantly consumed by who is texting you back, who is including you, who is validating you, then your reality becomes a constant state of anxiety, dependence, and emotional instability. But if your attention shifts toward your own growth, your own goals, your own healing, your own discipline, your reality starts shifting too. It becomes calmer, more stable, more intentional, more yours. And that is the point. Making your life yours again. Not a performance for an audience that may or may not be paying attention. Not a desperate bid for inclusion in circles that may or may not value you, but a genuinely self-directed life, built on your own terms, shaped by your own values, moving in a direction you chose, not one you drifted into because you were too busy watching what everyone else was doing. You have one life, and the amount of it you have spent chasing people who are not chasing you back is time you will not get to reclaim. But you can start today, right now, this moment. Choose yourself, not arrogantly, not selfishly, but firmly, unapologetically, with a quiet conviction that your life matters enough to actually invest in it, even if nobody else is investing in it right now. Because here is the beautiful truth that waits on the other side of this decision. The people who are truly meant for you, the ones who will love the real you, support the real you, stay for the real you, those people will not require chasing. They will show up, not because you performed well enough to earn them, but because you finally became honest enough to attract them. And that begins the day you stop chasing and start choosing yourself. Chapter 12. Your future is written in the hours nobody sees. We have covered a lot of ground together, and if you have stayed with me this far, I think it is because something in these words resonated with something you already knew but needed to hear spoken aloud. So let me leave you with this final thought, because I think it is the one that ties everything together. Your future is not going to be determined by a single dramatic moment. It is not going to be decided by one conversation, one opportunity, one relationship, or one lucky break. Your future is going to be determined by what you do in the hours nobody sees, the early mornings before the world wakes up, the late nights after everyone has gone to bed, the weekends where nobody is checking on you, the ordinary, unremarkable, completely invisible hours where you either build yourself or slowly let yourself deteriorate. That is where your life is actually being decided, not in the public moments, in the private ones. And I think on some level you already know this. You know that the version of yourself you want to become is not going to appear through some magical external event. That person is going to be built, brick by brick, habit by habit, decision by decision, in the quiet hours where nobody is keeping score. So the question is not whether transformation is possible. It is. The question is whether you are willing to do the invisible work that transformation requires. Are you willing to read the book when nobody assigned it? Are you willing to work out when nobody is watching? Are you willing to sit with your emotions instead of numbing them? Are you willing to have the difficult conversation with yourself that you have been avoiding? Are you willing to build discipline in silence, without applause, without recognition, without anyone telling you that you are doing a good job? Because if you are, then everything changes. Not tomorrow, not next week, but gradually, consistently, inevitably, everything changes. I have watched people transform their entire lives, not through dramatic breakthroughs, but through relentless daily commitment to becoming slightly better than they were the day before. People who were broke and built financial stability one smart decision at a time. People who were emotionally shattered and rebuilt their inner world one healthy boundary at a time. People who had no one believing in them and built a life so solid that belief became irrelevant, because the results spoke for themselves. And every single one of those people will tell you the same thing. The turning point was not a moment, it was a decision to stop waiting and start building, a decision to stop depending on the world to provide motivation and to start generating it internally, a decision to take full, uncomfortable, liberating responsibility for their own life. That decision is available to you right now, not next Monday, not after the holidays, not when you finally feel ready. Now. And I know what you might be thinking, but I have tried before and it did not work. I have started over so many times that starting over again feels pointless. I have made promises to myself that I did not keep, and I do not trust myself anymore. I hear you, and I want to address that directly because I think it is the biggest obstacle standing between most people and the life they want. You did not fail because you are incapable. You failed because you were relying on motivation instead of systems. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are unreliable. They come and go. Some mornings you will wake up full of fire, and other mornings you will want to stay in bed until noon. If your progress depends on how motivated you feel, your progress will be as inconsistent as your moods. But systems are different. Systems do not care how you feel. A system is a structure you build around yourself that makes progress automatic instead of optional. It is putting your running shoes next to your bed. So the first thing you see in the morning is a reminder to move. It is deleting the apps that steal your attention and replacing that time with something that adds to your life. It is scheduling your growth the way you schedule meetings, as non-negotiable commitments that do not depend on your emotional state. You do not need more motivation. You need better systems, and you need the self-compassion to keep refining those systems when they break, because they will break. And that is not failure. That is learning. Be patient with yourself. Transformation is not a straight line. It is a winding, looping, sometimes backwards feeling path that eventually leads somewhere extraordinary if you refuse to abandon it. You will have bad days. You will have setbacks. You will have moments where the old version of you pulls hard, trying to drag you back to comfort and complacency. But you are not that version anymore. Maybe you are not fully the new version yet either. Maybe you are somewhere in between, in that uncomfortable middle ground where you have outgrown who you used to be, but have not yet fully become who you are going to be. That is okay. The middle is where the work happens. The middle is where character is forged. The middle is where most people quit, which is exactly why the people who survive the middle are the ones who end up building extraordinary lives. You are in the middle right now, and I know it does not feel like a place of power, but it is, because every day you spend in the middle, choosing to keep going, is a day that separates you from the majority of people who gave up the moment progress stopped being comfortable. Let me tell you what is waiting for you on the other side of this season. Not perfection. Life is never perfect, but peace. Real, earned, bone deep peace that comes from knowing you built yourself from the ground up during a time when nobody was helping you. Confidence that does not depend on compliments. Stability that does not depend on circumstances. Purpose that does not depend on applause. And a relationship with yourself that is so solid, so honest, so deeply rooted, that no external storm can uproot it. That is what you are building right now, in the invisible hours, in the silent mornings, in the lonely nights, in the unremarkable decisions that nobody will ever photograph, post about, or celebrate. You are building something extraordinary, and the only thing standing between where you are now and where you want to be is your willingness to keep going when nobody is watching. So keep going. Not because someone told you to, Not because you read something inspiring and felt a temporary surge of motivation, but because deep down, underneath all the doubt and the exhaustion and the loneliness, you know you are capable of more than this. You know there is a version of you that has not been fully expressed yet, a version that is stronger, calmer, wiser, more at peace, a version that looks back on this season not with resentment, but with quiet, powerful gratitude. That version is not a fantasy. That version is a possibility. And the only way to reach them is to keep building, keep showing up, keep choosing yourself. Your life is not behind schedule. Your life is not broken beyond repair. Your life is not defined by who stayed and who left, by who clapped and who did not, by who believed in you and who doubted you. Your life is defined by what you did with the time you had, especially the time nobody saw. So use it well, because one day, I promise you, one day you are going to look back at this exact moment, this quiet, difficult, invisible season, and you are going to realize something that changes everything. This was not the chapter where your life fell apart. This was the chapter where you finally started putting it together. And the person who did that, the person who kept going when nobody was watching, when nobody was helping, when nobody was clapping, that person was always you. It was always you.